I want his job. You know how every now and then you see somebody with a job that just makes you pout? And you're like, how did I not get that job? Why didn't I take my career there? Well, Nick Simonson is one of those individuals. Dakota Edge Outdoors. You're about to find out a whole lot more about it. Nick, good to have you coming down the road with us.
You bet, Joel. Thanks for having me on.
So how many employees do you have? I mean, just,
None. It's just
what's the wages I'd be looking at if I came to work with you?
We'd start you off as an intern. How about unpaid internship? How does that sound?
Be careful. Be really careful, Nick, in what you ask. Tell people what Dakota Edge is all about.
It's all about sharing the great hunting and fishing we have in North Dakota and throughout the upper Midwest. I have clients in 45 different publications, websites, radio stations, all throughout North Dakota, some South Dakota, back in Minnesota where I resided for about 9 years, and then a couple out in Montana as well. And I just love sharing my take on the outdoors, and then all of the great news and exciting things that are happening in hunting and fishing and management. I also cover a lot of shooting sports as I'm active with Clay Target League. Just a ton of excitement, ton of stuff to experience, and I hope everyone gets a chance every single year, every single season to do so.
So where was home in Minnesota?
I was in Eveleth, Minnesota for 2 years, and then down in Marshall for about 7. And I was very active down there in Pheasants Forever, served as president of an exceptional chapter, the Lyon County Pheasants Forever, which had a strong history of putting grass in the ground, millions of dollars, hundreds of acres. It was fun to be a part of, and it was a big part of my involvement on the scene, particularly before kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old that I'm focused on now, but still remain involved in youth activities and shooting sports.
They can change a little bit of everything. There's no question about
Yeah.
that. That area, that's really not far. Yeah, I go south of Fargo about 65 miles, and so Marshall isn't that far for me. Hop, skip, and a jump to get over to that area and see. And you're right. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities over there. A lot of people don't know about. Want to talk a little bit about what it looks like out there. Drought season, I think you mentioned the grass that the local Pheasants Forever chapter put in there. There's a lot less grass going on now, in my home country in North Dakota and yours now. Give me your take on what conditions are right now.
Yeah, it's challenging. There's no doubt about it. We just didn't have the moisture coming out of fall into spring, and we didn't have any spring moisture, obviously. Summer making it very, very difficult. So the grass that you might have seen coming up and you got out and explored during grouse season in September, you kind of recognize, it might be a little bit more challenging to find birds when it came to pheasant season, and that's absolutely the case. And then, of course, when we get the rain, it's harvest season, so whatever good crops did happen, they're slower coming off. So I think hunters are finding some challenge right now for pheasants, but I think the hunters that are out there and the folks that are hitting the ground are seeing that numbers for pheasants aren't as bad as predicted. I think that the drought may have impacted some of the counts, not the major skew that we saw, but maybe accounting for 5 or 10% change in the bootstrap numbers they were seeing. So I think people will be pleasantly surprised based on the numbers that were coming from Game and Fish and then what they're witnessing with their own eyes as the corn and the soy comes off. But again, the challenge is going to be habitat. That's what we've seen, not only in North Dakota, but nationwide, is this struggle to get back up with CRP acres on the ground. And if you don't have grass, you don't have birds. And that's the challenge that we face as conservationists, as landowners, as operators, finding that balance between feeding the world and preserving our hunting heritage.
Well, there's another part to that, too. And you're spot on right. If you get out there and get after it, you're going to see some birds, but it's just not going to be as easy as what some of us have been so spoiled to have. One time I went out this year in 9 minutes, I had my limit. I got lucky. Okay. Another time I went out all day, saw about 10 roosters, but the fact of the matter is those 10 roosters were smarter than me. And so I went home empty, but I still had a great day. I was still outdoors. I was still, seeing some buddies as we went out and took to the field. And, my understanding and my appreciation is just like yours, just getting out in the outdoors and having fun. I mean, Nick, that's where it's at.
Absolutely. So much more of it, killing is 0.5% of the process. And if I could find a way to catch and release a rooster, I absolutely would, in a situation that, watching the sunrise from a deer stand, even if you don't see a deer or pull the trigger, or see tons of deer but don't see the deer you want. I mean, being out watching a dog work, even if he flushes 40 hens and no roosters. I mean, there are so many more elements to the experience. And I think even better is walking along with a kid who's never hunted before, and you leave your gun in the truck and you watch that passion take hold in a young person. Who could ask for anything more?
I was talking the other day on my radio show about the youth hunting season and what a huge success that's been. You know, that we had a long talk about in the legislature. There's always plenty of hunters in the legislature who don't think that the youth should get a crack at deer first, and you know, and there's always plenty of them that don't believe that somebody should be able to take to the field before them. I think the debate's over. I really do. I think the debate over whether or not, you know, this is a good thing, and whether or not we're going to produce more hunters out of it is over. It's a good law.
Absolutely, across all different seasons, whether it's upland or what's the special pheasant weekend or the youth waterfowl weekend or our youth deer season. I mean, the kids are the future, and we struggle against, you know, so many other distractions, good and not so good, you know, whether it's sports or computers or iPad or whatever the case might be. Getting those kids out there, and more importantly, helping them find success, because, you know, whether they shoot the biggest buck of their life on the first day of their first antlered youth season, or just take a doe. I mean, whatever it might be that drives their passion, having that success early is what helps keep them coming back. And 100% agree with you on that, that we should promote those youth seasons, and that ship has sailed. I don't think you hear as much debate about that anymore.
By now you can tell what an advocate he is for the outdoors. He was named 2020 Outdoors Communicator of the Year by the North Dakota Wildlife Federation. And of course, he mentioned the Pheasants Forever Volunteer of the Year in 2016, which means not only does he take to the field hunting and fishing, but he believes in putting back. Nick, you mentioned stories. You mentioned the fun of getting to Dakota Edge Outdoors, and you mentioned stories that go with it. Give me an example, if you would.
Yeah, I think the one that resonates most, it was the part of the eulogy I gave at my father's funeral, was the first time I really got hooked on fishing. I had been a fisher. I had fished my whole life from when I was 3 years old and up. But the moment that changed my life was my dad and I were fishing at Bald Hill Dam. I was 19 years old, probably more interested in partying and hanging out with my friends. But one morning we went fishing, and I didn't catch anything. And he's like, well, just 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes. And then we worked our way down, and he caught a few white bass, and I was getting kind of discouraged. And he's like, just 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes. And we got to the end after a few 5 more minutes, and I can see the cast hanging out over the water as it splashes down. And we caught 100 white bass in about an hour. And I was like, oh, we need to come back right after lunch. We got my brother. But I think to myself, if it wasn't for that 5 more minutes, and again and again and again, until that moment when it happened, I wouldn't be the outdoorsman I am today, and I wouldn't have the passion for fishing and hunting that I do. And that time with my dad resonates with me and will for the rest of my life.
There's a couple of things that I want to share with you, which is going to make your head bob up and down because you already know them, but I'm going to say them, which is, my grandkids. The oldest 3 are girl, boy, girl. Okay, so there's this notion that if you're going to take somebody out, always take out your little grandson. I tell you what, I took my granddaughter out, and in the fishing boat that I have, we went out, and we were catching crappie a little bit. Now, when I leave, one of my granddaughters, one of those 3 oldest of my 6 grandkids, if I leave, they're going to want to know when. And when I took them fishing, the big tell for me is just what you said. Are we done? Are we done? There's no are we done anymore. And so whatever I did right. They're outdoors people now. They really are.
Yeah, absolutely. And the female presence in the outdoors, and particularly in shooting sports. I had a buddy who made a comment. He goes, I always wanted boys when I was growing up until I realized how well my daughters shoot in clay target. And that's right. There's an untapped market. There's a strong female presence, and I think a growing female presence in the field and on the water. And yeah, don't overlook those girls. They make the best trap shooters, the best archery participants, and obviously a very strong presence in the outdoors. So regardless of gender, get those kids out there. Yeah,
you would know the answer to this better than I would, but Nick, are there less waterfowl hunters out this season? And the way I'm gauging this is by driving by those small town motels, whether or not I'm seeing, the camo duck boats or not. And it just seems like some of the guys I've met from out of state, I'm not seeing as much this year. And I don't know if it's lack of water, I don't know what it is, or quite frankly, if I'm wrong. And so I'm curious what your take on it is.
Yeah, I think I was going to lean into the COVID idea, but that's not the case. I think you still would have had some folks. We had that border closure last year where a lot of folks were stopped short of Canada and like, hey, let's go to North Dakota. And everything, you're right, was pretty thick with water. And in this case, we're seeing a lot less water. So I think that probably caught the headlines and folks learned real quick. Plus, the numbers there, too, were not very good when it came to reproduction this spring. And obviously, Game and Fish does a good job of shooting straight and telling us what's going on with their releases and their information, and I'll always be a proponent for that. So good or bad, people take that for what it is, and they make their plans accordingly. So I would agree the number of incoming hunters from outstate and probably resident is off slightly.
Yeah, and my guess is they're going to be back.
Right.
And you're probably right to have a person think a little bit about COVID. We're going into deer season. We're a hop, skip, and a jump away from deer season right now. And when we take to the field with deer hunting, I know people like yourself advocate on behalf of safety big time. We've had some tragic stories when it comes to it. And, I have a question about that. Are we doing a good enough job of educating the young people to be better hunters when it comes to safety than what some of the old people are?
Yeah, I think that safety has improved a lot. I think one area I'd like to see more safety focus on is like use of tree stands, and I know that's part of archery components in certain field training or hunter safety courses. I think use of lanyards and those kind of things to prevent fall-related accidents, because when you look at that landscape, the injuries resulting from firearms are far less from individuals who fall from an elevated platform every single year. And those are injuries that last a lifetime in the form of paralysis or even the remnants of a broken bone and the recovery that comes from that. So I think I'd like to see more common sense safety there. I think we're doing a good job on the firearms side. North Dakota has an excellent record in terms of firearms related injuries, fairly low in a hunting scenario. But yeah, it should always be front of mind. As one who coaches Clay Target League, that is the first and foremost stop when it comes to every single Sunday that we shoot, is that safety is at the forefront. You just can't lose sight of that. You just can't. And it takes a reminder or it takes a headline somewhere just to point out that, hey, that needs to remain front of mind.
What's your take on what we're doing at the school level when it comes to trap shooting?
Yeah, I think right now we're doing everything right. We have a great organization at USA Clay Target League, USA College Clay Target League, all part of the same organization, who are facilitating school-sanctioned and school-sponsored shotgun sports. And you know what? If I walked into a principal's office and said, I've got a sport for you where a kid breaks a leg, gets a concussion, gets knocked out, goes to the hospital every single Friday night, would you pick it up? And that, I'm sure they would look at me like I was nuts, and I would say, well, that's football. Now I've got a sport for you where there have been no injuries in 22 years. There have been no deaths in 22 years. It is the safest possible sport out there, but it involves a shotgun. That historically has caused some reserve or some trepidation in school boards and principals, but I think we've turned that corner. I think the USA Clay Target League's zero injury safety record and their positive reinforcement of safety on the trap range has helped build an incredible program that has gotten the buy-in of hundreds, if not thousands, of schools across the nation, particularly strongholds in Minnesota, growing in North Dakota and South Dakota. And this is making a change in kids' lives, not just with competency with firearms, but just in their confidence and their understanding of life overall.
Well, you're right. And let me give you an example in my life. I have somebody near and dear to me. He's my nephew. I say that so I sound younger than what I am. He'd be considered my great nephew, and he competes in West Fargo in target shooting. And, this is a young man that loves the outdoors. And when given the option between football and clays, when given the option, he was raised at hockey camp. He's a good hockey player, but he is passionate about clay shooting, about target shooting. And here's the thing. He is an eighth grader, made All-State. And so he walks around with a confidence now that he didn't have before. And as you pointed out, he can do this the rest of his life. You know, when this young man's 30, he wasn't ever going to be playing football anymore. And so as a parent, how do we get word out to even more that look, this is a great sport? I mean, how do we get word out even more to some of those parents that this is a great activity for their kids?
The big part is social media. I think posting these kids' accomplishments, and as we talked about, USA Clay Target has done a fantastic job. North Dakota Clay Target, Minnesota Clay Target, and all the affiliates have such strong social media presence where they tout those kids, those top 100 or those top 5% that make all state in their states, you know, celebrating these accomplishments, because like you talked about earlier, you know, kids that can drop 24 or 25 with some regularity, they put guys like you and me to shame. I mean, these are some incredible kids doing some awesome things, you know. I mean, and a 25 or a straight 100 or whatever it might be, I mean, that's your hole-in-one in golf. And I like to think that Clay Target, you know, like you said, is a lifelong pursuit and way more fun than golf.
And the really cool part, and I know I'm going back to something you and I talked about earlier and you advocated for, but I see a lot of girls competing at this. You know, I see a lot of girls competing at this, and I see how that's going to kind of transcend into, you know, if you're going to go get some pheasants, I'm coming with. And I think that's a good thing as well.
Absolutely. We talked about, you know, female involvement in the outdoors, and in terms of dominance on whether it's the trap range or the skeet range. You look to North Dakota High School Championship. Rachel Dunlop went out and won the ladies high gun at the state tournament, representing female shooters very, very well. Jenna Thompson at Bismarck State College last fall, in their first season, she was the nationwide ladies champion. I mean, it's so you know, across the board, it's your Title IX. Your Title IX issues are out the window. Your gender differences don't matter. Guys and gals can shoot. And I would probably make the argument that female shooters are easier to coach. They're much more receptive to changes or trying this form or stance or adjusting X, Y, or Z in their shot. Very responsive, not trying to prove anything out there and just actually going out and proving it. So yeah, strong market out there for those ladies who want to get involved in shooting sports on the high school or college level.
Okay, Nick, I'm going to give you a chance to chew me out, which, by the way, people do on a regular basis. Last winter, and I practically live in my fish house in the winter, mostly social than anything else. Get the guys in there, see if anybody's going to eat a smoked oyster or sardine, and play a little cards. You know, during the COVID year, that was like a saving grace. It really was. But last year, when I went out, I wanted the fish house out before Christmas because I have all these people flock to my place at Christmas, and I wanted to have a place for us to go, to get away. And so I hooked it up to my Ranger. I take it out there. There's no other big houses out there, but I went out there with my electric auger. I popped some holes. Everything's above 8 inches everywhere I look. And so I think, what the heck? You know, let's go. I go out there. That snowed the night before, and I'm right on a pressure ridge, and I didn't pay attention to it. And so when I popped some holes and I had some good depth underneath me, then I go back on the trail where I was after I see it, and some of that was 3 inches. And so, you know, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell people that want to go ice fishing this winter what they're supposed to do versus what I did.
Yeah, that's right. The ultimate rule is no ice is safe ice. You may never know if there's a giant school of ciscos or where the Canada geese just left or other sort of animal activity which may weaken the ice, beaver dams or beaver lodges or where their travel corridors are. And then moving water, obviously. We saw 2 years ago, that fall with all of the rain and just how they had to shut down Pipestem and Jamestown reservoirs. There's so many different elements that impact ice safety, you know, and be a tough guy. You know, put your shoulder straps on and pull your portables out there, all right? When you only got 3 or 4 inches of ice and you're starting to think about it, you know, make sure it's safe even just for foot travel. Follow those guidelines, but remember, no ice is 100% safe ice, and I only walk on if I can. I really hate driving on ice. It freaks me out with a vehicle, even in the dead of January or February. So, yeah, I try to walk on as much as I can.
It's tough to play pinochle in a portable. Can we admit that? You know, if someone would have told my dad, who's gone now, if somebody would have told my dad that I'd be watching football inside a fish house with a furnace running, with a microwave oven and a stove, he would have looked at me and just said, "You wimp." I mean, I thought you loved the outdoors, and so that was part of the problem as a whole. So, I mean, here's the thing, Nick. you have that opportunity seasonally for a little bit of everything. And I think that's the beauty of what people like you tell when you tell stories.
Absolutely, and you know what? I wouldn't be caught dead on the ice before pheasant hunting season ends, especially late season. I love late season. I love the color of the birds, how vibrant they are against the white background. If you can get a point on a nice snowy clump of cattails, and then that rooster explodes, I mean, that's what draws me in. And sharing those late season stories. And hey, ice fishing can wait till January, you know. But like you said, across the board with year-round, you know, the Missouri River is open, you know, year-round. There are a lot of opportunities in the spring to get out on walleyes, trout, whatever it might be in North Dakota. And you're right, a lot of chances to tell a lot of great stories about wonderful experiences.
One more time, tell people where to go to find your work and take part of it and enjoy it.
Yeah, check us out on dakotaedge.com. You can find us in a lot of great local newspapers. I also write for Dakota Country Magazine, and at Facebook and Twitter at Dakota Edge 1.
I could talk to you all day, man. Hopefully we'll see you out there.